She refused to delete her dating apps after our engagement and said, "I'll be having more fun anyway." So I left the ring, walked out, and built a life without her. 2 years later, she saw me happy with someone else and finally learned what real loss feels like. I am 28, and I thought I knew where my life was headed. 5 years felt like the kind of time that builds something solid. On a wet November evening, I carried a small velvet box into our favorite Italian restaurant. When I opened the box, she laughed. "Are you serious?" she asked, sweeping crumbs aside with the back of her thumb. She reached for her glass without looking at the ring. "I can't delete the apps," she said. "I like keeping my options." Her voice carried, and heads turned. I remember my hands cooling. Her expression was almost amused, like she had tossed a coin and waited to see which side would land. "We were done talking about options," I said. I kept my voice level. The waiter hovered nearby, and the couple at the next table watched with polite interest. Lila smiled, the kind that dared you to call it out. "Relax," she said. "I'm not hurting anyone." The sentence cut straighter than any insult. I pushed my chair back so slowly that the sound of wood scraping the floor felt loud. I set the ring box on the table and did something that surprised me. "Let's fix that," I said. I folded my coat around me and stepped into the drizzle. The city smelled like wet pavement and the faint heat of dinners. My phone blinked twice that night. Then it kept blinking. By the time I pulled over on the shoulder of the highway, there were 47 missed calls. Her messages flooded in, short, sharp, then long and pleading. I didn't answer. I needed space that was not full of explanations. I drove until the red taillights disappeared behind a stretch of black road. A week later, her social feed was filled with rooftop pictures beside a guy named Mark. Caption: "Living more." The photos looked staged, meant to say something to someone. I boxed up shirts and postcards, shoved them into a big carton, and stacked the Polaroid face down. Every picture felt like a remark written in invisible ink, meant to sting when I caught the light. 2 weeks after the restaurant, we stood in the park where we'd first kissed. The trees had lost most of their leaves, and the grass was wet. She came in a denim jacket, hands in pockets, like the day was nothing more than weather. I held the velvet box like an old weight. "You left it?" she asked. There was no surprise in her voice, only a small smile that made my gut knot. "On purpose," I said. "Because you refused to choose." She flicked a cigarette without looking at me. Smoke drifted between us, and for the first time, her calm felt like cruelty. "You're dramatic," she said, as if that settled everything. She walked away and kept her pace steady. The walk back to my car felt like a small, private surrender. I knew then that the thing that had been growing between us was not the quiet work of two people building a life. It was one-sided labor, my hands always arranging pieces she would not commit to. 2 months after the park, Lila started dating Mark full-time. At first, it looked like a distraction, a new name filling the gaps she'd left. Then screenshots arrived from a roommate. Long messages where she bragged about attention, about being wanted. Her posts turned sharp, captions short and loud. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in watching someone stumble. I only watched because I couldn't help it. Mark left after a few months. He vanished the way some people do now, slow at first, then gone. Her stories changed tone. The rooftop selfies disappeared and were replaced by late-night captions with clipped lines about trust and luck. I felt something like relief and also a small, careful sadness. This was not a triumph. It was a reminder that choices have tails that keep going long after the thunder. 6 months after I walked out, she messaged at 2:03 a.m. Short bursts, messy sentences. "Can we talk? I messed up. I miss us." I thumbed a reply that sat there like a test. Watch me move on. I didn't send it. Instead, I signed up for things I'd always put off. I woke up early and pushed myself at the gym. I booked a solo trip to a place I'd never been. On weekends, I took a pottery class. My hands learned to shape clay, to make something from a lump that refused to cooperate at first. The bowl I made was rough, but it held water. It felt like an honest thing. A few months later, at a mutual friend's party, Lila showed up. She was quiet, and there was a look on her face I'd seen before, the one regret makes when it's just learning how to be heavy. She watched me from across the room while I laughed with people who cared in ways that felt easy. Someone sent me a clip. She tried to pull me aside and, in a low voice, told me she was wrong. I smiled and said, "Thanks for telling me." Then I stepped back into the group. It wasn't a mic drop moment. It was a small, clear boundary. Life's small details made the difference. A Tuesday grocery run at 5:30 p.m. turned into routine proof that life could be ordinary and full. Claire, a woman I'd met at the laundromat who joked about my burnt toast, started showing up in those ordinary places. She'd bring me a spare umbrella when I forgot mine. She'd fold a sweater I'd left on a chair and leave it like a small kindness. Routine isn't flashy. It's going to the store and remembering the brand of milk someone likes. It's showing up when the weather is bad. That steady presence began to matter more than any dramatic apology could. I started therapy because someone suggested terms for what I tolerated. I wrote my nights down in notebooks at 3 in the morning. The lines were sharp at first, then softer. My photos shifted from carefully staged to candid shots of friends and small, honest things. Coworkers asked if I was dating. I would say no. I'm learning how to be chosen. That line felt true and strange. One evening at Jake's birthday, I saw Lila again. She entered like a current, loud and purposeful. Our eyes met, and something flickered across her face. For a moment, she looked as if she might reach across what had happened. Instead, she leaned toward her table and, in a voice meant to be heard, said, "He still looks hurt." A few heads turned. The kind of laughter that followed felt like a jury passing sentence. She walked past me while the room hummed. "Still single, Aaron? Guess those dating apps didn't work out for you," she said, as if that line could stitch over everything. People who had once treated me like family laughed with her. I kept my face steady. I raised my glass and said, "Guess they worked out too well for you, Lila." Her smile dropped away. I left the party before she could answer. That moment could have been the old story, an argument in a loud room, some lines exchanged and then forgotten. Instead, it became another quiet marker on the map of my life, proof that I did not need to react to every provocation. I walked out not to win, but because something inside me had already moved. 2 weeks later, Mia, one of her friends, called. "She's been crying every night," she told me. "Mark dumped her." I didn't respond. I had no words to fix what had been damaged. I checked Lila's profile and found one black post. Some mistakes can't be fixed. I locked my phone and felt a small, steady calm. This was not the end of her story, but it wasn't mine either. The road forward felt quiet and real. A year later, I barely recognized the man in the mirror. Not because I'd changed drastically, but because peace had settled where chaos used to live. The mirror no longer reflected exhaustion or confusion. It showed a calm I'd built from scratch. Claire was still around. What started as casual coffee runs had turned into slow, patient mornings together. She never asked for explanations I didn't want to give. She just listened, and when she spoke, it was never to compare or fix, just to understand. There was no drama, no silent tests, just small, consistent kindness, the kind you can't fake. One Sunday morning, I received an unexpected text. It was from Lila's brother. "Hey man, just thought you should know. Lila moved back home. She's been going through a rough time." I stared at it for a while, then typed back, "Thanks. I hope she finds peace." It wasn't bitterness, just honesty. Because at that point, I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted release. Later that day, Claire and I were at a farmer's market. I was picking oranges when I heard my name. That familiar tone, soft but uncertain. I turned, and there she was. Lila. Same eyes, but the energy was gone, replaced by something quieter. "Regret, maybe." "Aaron," she said, voice cracking slightly. "You look different." "I feel different," I replied. She looked down, playing with the ring on her finger, not an engagement ring, just something to keep her hands busy. I wanted to say sorry. For everything. For how loud I was. For how I made fun of what we had. I thought I was winning when I left. Turns out, I just lost something good. I nodded. We both learned something. Her eyes glistened. "You're happy now, aren't you?" "I'm peaceful," I said. "Happiness comes and goes, but peace stays." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes from understanding too late. Claire returned, holding 2 coffees, and introduced herself politely. Lila froze for a moment, then said, "You're lucky." Claire smiled, replying gently, "So is he." That small exchange, simple, human, kind, felt like closure I didn't even know I needed. When we left, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Some endings don't need grand speeches or viral moments. They end quietly, like the closing of a door that should have been shut long ago. Weeks later, while sorting through old photos, I found one of me and Lila. A blurry shot from a road trip, wind in our faces. For a second, I almost felt nostalgic. Then I realized, some people are lessons, not losses. That night, Claire and I watched a movie and laughed until midnight. My phone buzzed once, a message request from Lila. I didn't open it. Instead, I turned off my phone, pulled Claire closer, and thought to myself. It had been almost 2 years since that farmer's market encounter. Lila stood on her small apartment balcony, coffee in hand, watching the city lights flicker like 1,000 reminders of what could have been. The noise below, cars, laughter, life, felt distant. Everything she once chased now seemed hollow. Mark had left long ago. The attention she'd craved on social media had faded too. Likes didn't feel like validation anymore, just echoes. The friends who once cheered her recklessness had drifted away, moving on to quieter, steadier lives. She still scrolled sometimes, and one night, she came across a post that stopped her. A photo of Aaron and Claire at a lake. Nothing fancy, just two people sitting barefoot on a dock, laughing. The caption read, "Peace feels like this." For a long time, she stared at it. There was no bitterness this time, just an ache. The kind that comes when you realize you burned the bridge that led to your best self. She thought back to that day at the proposal, the way she'd made a joke loud enough for strangers to hear, trying to prove she didn't care. The truth was, she cared too much about being admired and too little about being loved. She closed her phone and whispered, "You were right, Aaron." Her life had become a long reflection. Therapy sessions, long walks, and learning how to sit with silence. She began volunteering at an animal shelter, helping train rescue dogs. It was slow work, messy, but it made her feel grounded. Each time a frightened dog learned to trust again, something inside her healed, too. Months later, she bumped into Aaron's friend Jake at a cafe. He smiled politely, surprised. "How have you been, Lila?" "Better," she said. "Finally better." He nodded. "Aaron's doing good. He's happy." "I know," she said softly. "He deserves it." That night, she journaled for the first time in years. The page read, "I ruined something real because I didn't know how to love quietly. Now I'm learning. Slowly, but I am." Outside, the city glowed like a second chance waiting to be earned. She didn't text Aaron again, not because she didn't want to, but because she finally respected his peace enough to leave it untouched. Instead, she smiled at the thought that somewhere out there, he'd found what they both had been searching for, a love that didn't need noise to feel real. And as the night breeze brushed her hair, she whispered to herself, half prayer, half confession, "Karma isn't cruel. It's patient, and it always teaches you when you're ready to listen." Final scene. 2 years later. Aaron and Claire sat at a small cafe near the beach, sharing breakfast as the sun spilled gold over the water. Claire was reading something on her phone, smiling softly. "You remember that art show I told you about?" she asked. "They just confirmed my entry." Aaron grinned. "See? Told you they'd love your work." He looked genuinely proud, the kind of pride that comes from wanting someone else to shine, not compete. His phone buzzed, and out of habit, he glanced at it. A notification from a local newspaper. "Meet the volunteers behind Hope Tales, the shelter changing lives in downtown." There was a picture attached, a familiar one. Lila, kneeling beside a rescued dog, smiling. Not the camera-ready grin she used to wear, but something softer, real. Claire leaned over. "She seems kind," she said simply, unaware of the shared history. Aaron looked for a moment longer. "Yeah," he said. "She's finding her way." He put his phone face down and returned to his coffee. The ocean murmured in the background. There was no sting, no ghost left behind. Only quiet understanding that life had unfolded exactly as it needed to. Lila, on her end, was cleaning kennels later that morning when her coworker laughed. "Some guy just donated 10 grand to the shelter. Didn't leave a name, just a note. For second chances, for both of us." She froze. The handwriting looked familiar. She didn't cry, not this time. She just smiled, whispered a soft thank you to the air, and went back to work, a small tear catching light on her cheek. Some stories don't end with revenge. Because in the end, karma didn't destroy her. It healed her, just slowly enough to make sure she never forgot the lesson.